Howdy, folks. I hope y'all are having a good evening. This is Ahmad Painter, and I'm here with Mark Eddy. This is Open Canvas on www.freedomslips.com. We're totally listener supported. So if you got a buck or two, we'd sure appreciate it. We've got a couple of specials going on right now for the month of December. Anybody that donates $25 or more will get a pocket knife, and the bigger the donation, the bigger the blade. And if we meet our goal by the 20th, anything over the gold will be split between Toys or Tots and Meals for Veterans. And if we don't make it by the 20th, but we do make it by the end of the month, anything over that will be donated to the Battered Women's Fund in Lexington, Kentucky. So with that said, I think, Mark, you send the cold weather and the rain down here?
No, I did not do that. Someone's sending us.
I mean, it's getting down in the 60s tonight. What the heck?
No, it's probably only going to be in the 50s here tonight in near near Ohio. But I'm appreciative of any warm weather. No, yeah, no snow is a good day for me. So I'm enjoying it. I don't know what the chemtrails are doing, but it's keeping the snow away. Uh,
Well, I'm working inside, so I ain't so bad off this week.
okay. Well, we have about 55 minutes with our first guest, and we might as well just try to maximize the time. So, Cliff Dunning is our first hour guest. He's a colleague. Yeah, he's the host of Earth Ancients internet radio show on Saturdays from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern time on Blog Talk Radio. So welcome, Cliff. Thanks for joining us tonight. How you doing?
Great. Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. We're out here in the West Coast, San Francisco, and we are having some good rain. So we're welcoming finally a true winter. So I'm happy.
Hopefully it relieves the drought.
It's
Definitely.
actually raining in Southern California.
San Francisco. I don't know about L.A. I think they got their share of rain, but up here in the hills, Tahoe area, they got 3 feet the last couple of days, and that's a huge plus because we haven't had much snow in the last year and a half. So remember now we got
because of that song "It Never Rains in Southern California."
Well, we have the El Nino effect happening.
So I was ignorant about where you were at.
Yeah,
I'm all the way on the other coast.
Yeah, no sweat. We're up here high in Northern California.
Okay. Hey, Cliff, we have similar shows. Probably have the same guests on as they make the lecture circuits about their interesting books. What are you learning from your guests that is not included in the history section of the Common Core curriculum?
That's a good one. When I think about what is happening with our understanding of history, things are changing so fast. Our understanding, science is being able to post their research, their results on the internet, and they're being cataloged, they're being displayed, they're being distributed to a wider audience much quicker. So our understanding of new discoveries and what was thought of in the past is changing. And it's funny, when you say that, in 1995, Graham Hancock came out with this amazing book called Fingerprints of the Gods. And for those of you who don't know about it, he basically chronicles the evidence of ancient civilizations that appear to predate our understanding of history. And if for most of you who went to school, you know that Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt is kind of the starting point, about 5000 BC.
That's a traditional view, yeah.
Yeah, it's traditional, but Graham kind of broke that up a little bit and began showing evidence of ruins in Lebanon at Baalbek and in Tiwanaku, South America, and other places that were dated or carbon dated before 5000 BC. And in that book, he basically went around the world and said, this is evidence of a very advanced culture that predates our understanding of history. So, but at that time, he couldn't really put a reason why they had disappeared. And moving forward to 2016, it's funny, he just released a new book called Magician of the Gods, in where he states and shows through science that the events of the Younger Dryas were actually not what we thought. They were much more severe, and the evidence shows that whatever was on the surface of the planet prior to 10,000 years ago was wiped clean. So this is interesting. And in his book, he actually reveals that this event not only wiped the surface clean of the animals, but any humans that were alive in certain areas geologically were killed too. He doesn't use the word Atlantis, but there's a lot of references to advanced technology. And
is
what
the same
yeah, go
area
ahead.
that Andrew Collins found the ash layer?
Andrew Collins talks about Göbekli Tepe quite a bit, which is in Turkey, and that's another prehistoric site that is very.
This place they found was in England, and I thought what they believed is that
there's like an. Yeah, Thomas, you're talking about an ash layer,
right?
Right.
Oh, yes, ash layer. Yes, yeah, that's exactly right. And
they believe maybe a comet or a asteroid hit somewhere in near the equator, but in the Atlantic.
Yeah, well, it's funny because in this new book, he actually shows that it hit the States, the United States, in a number of areas, and he references a geologist named Randall Carlson and his work, and the photographs show huge sections of the upper United States all the way out to Washington State, where there's a flood path, a huge flood path, and most of us don't recognize it because it's gigantic. But if you look at it from satellite, it's huge. But the bottom line was this Younger Dryas event destroyed the planet. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is, back in 1995, it was like, okay, yeah, that it's a nice event. We're not really sure about it. But every year, more and more evidence is coming up. And what's really cool about the whole ancient Earth, ancient culture topic is that the evidence is very clear now that the civilization prior to us was in many ways very sophisticated, and as sophisticated as we are, except their paradigm of science, which is being revealed in these scanning technologies, had to do with subtle energy in the earth. And this is what fascinates the heck out of me. There was a gentleman named John Burke who about 5 years ago started using geomagnetic sensing devices to test a lot of these mounds in the Mississippi area and some of the caves, the rock caves. And what he determined was the people who built these locations had an understanding of subtle energy that we don't understand. And they built these rock quartz settlements and caves that actually enhanced the geomagnetic telluric fields that came up from the ground naturally. And he believes that it all has to do with ley lines. These places were built on top of ley lines that go crisscross the country and go into the European area, and they're all over the place.
Right.
But anyhow, it's constantly fascinating. And so the thing that's come to light is the subtle energy, the technology behind that is just becoming available to us to understand because we have the tools to test it. And what blew me away was, and Graham talks just a little bit about this, is that the Mayas' entire culture, their whole pyramid culture, a great deal of the pyramids were built over these geomagnetic fields. And it's like, well, what's the big deal there? Well, what we now know and what he shows, and the thing that he did, and he just passed away a couple of years ago, which was a huge loss because he was a genius. But what he discovered was that the Maya had a technology behind their pyramid building. And what happens is, as these natural geomagnetic fields begin to bubble up and they begin to burst into the atmosphere, these pyramids were able to modify and enhance the strength of the fields. So when the time that the field got up to the top, whatever was up on top, and the last generations of Maya would use these pyramids to propagate crop seeds. They would enhance them, and man, these seeds would grow like you cannot believe. But I believe that they were originally built for health improvement, for psychic awareness, for a number of other things. And I believe there was technology involved with this. And before we started, Tom, you mentioned that Tesla was on your mind, and I believe Tesla understood these fields that are very plentiful on the earth, and these ancient cultures were able to harness that. So, and this is all coming out on the internet, and it's been out for a while, and this is what's so exciting for me on my show, Earth Ancients, is that all these guys that are on there are basically saying, look, this is something you need to pay attention to. This is changing our history, and in fact, it has changed our history. The problem is that academic science just hasn't caught up yet, and it's just their nature that they're slow to grasp and to appreciate new information.
Well, so, they wrote the books wrong. They want to teach you out of them a while. I agree with the ley line stuff. I mean, if you can actually go from one major site to another monolithic major site, and they're all along these ley lines.
Yeah.
And it's pretty awesome.
Cliff, do you find that your show, the variety of other internet radio shows, Scott Walters, America Unearthed show, that they are providing more leading edge information than the mainstream academic people?
Yes. Well, here's an example. And I say this very carefully because I don't want to offend anybody, but if you follow Ancient Aliens, the TV series, there's not a great deal of good information that's coming out of there. I mean, some of the sites they go to are just gorgeous. I mean, some of the places they go to and film, it's beautifully photographed and some information. But a lot of the stuff in their program is rehashed, and it's all some of it's conspiracy and some of it's mythology and things like that. Where Scott Walters is a geologic scientist, and he's doing solid evaluation and making really amazing headway in our understanding of early America. And I had Dr. Robert Schoch on, and of course, if you don't know who he is, he's the one who, along with John Anthony West, rewrote the history of ancient Egypt based on the geological findings of the Great Sphinx. They dated it back 5,000 years before Khufu, which was 2,500 years ago, and actually there's conservative estimates that structure is more like 40,000 or 50,000 years old, which blows everyone's mind. But when he was on the program, his information is all scientifically based, except a lot of people consider it pseudoscience because it doesn't fall in line with traditional scientific thought. So, I mean, what people like Scott Walters and Hancock, Randall Carlson, and just hundreds of other individuals are showing is that there is a science behind ancient culture that is present, that is detectable, that is measurable, and we need to pay attention. And what's happening is that traditional science is starting to pay attention because they can't poo-poo it anymore.
That's good. I've talked to Dr. Robert Chuck and Anthony West at different times, and they're both awesome guests, and they bring forth a lot of information. I myself like to bring forth rock hard information, and so does Mark. And when it's skeptical, we usually tell people that, you got to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. It's interesting. If you study the Hindu culture, and that's the other thing about Western science, here's the Hindus that have been on the earth thousands of years, or the Chinese that have been around thousands and thousands of years, and yet we don't really appreciate these ancient cultures.
With a written history that old.
I know. The thing I was going to bring up, and something I learned a couple of years ago, is the Hindu yugas. And if you study the yugas, they go back and reveal human culture not 100,000 years ago, but 1,000,000+ years ago. And when you say that, it's like a fantasy. It's like a total fantasy. There were people on Earth 1,000,000 years ago. Well, what happened to them? Well, according to the yugas, there's natural cyclic historical events. We know in certain parts of India there are areas where a bomb went off, a nuclear bomb, and basically wiped out an entire city. And we know that because there's still radiation on the bodies and the skeletal remains and on the ruins. And then when you read some of these ancient Vedic texts, they talk about flying machines, 10, 20,000 years ago. And it's so easy just to say, oh, it's all fantasy, it's a mythology. But there's ruins that are evidence of, wars and battles. So the Yugas talk about mankind destroying themselves, and then like the Younger Dryas, nature probably had something to do with the various cultures, the various Earth civilizations being wiped out. So it makes more sense. It's more of a solid understanding that there have been multiple ancient cultures on our planet, and there's evidence in their ruins, and to easily write them off just because they don't fall within your paradigm is just too simplistic. So the Yugas are very cool.
They have a habit of forgetting out-of-place artifacts, pushing them to the side and not wanting to deal with them. I find that pretty sad that they do this. And if they took into consideration some of the things that they do find, they'll know for sure that we're far older than what they said.
Well, it's funny because if you read, there's a chapter in Robert Schoch's newest book on ancient unknown civilizations. He's a associate professor at Boston University, and he basically lays it out that you come up with a new idea, you create the evidence, you hypothesize about how they were here and what they did, and it slowly begins to seep in. You get opposition, and then after a few years, they kind of go, oh, I got to look at that, and as more evidence comes up. It's not an immediate change. It's a slow, gradual change in a perspective, a point of view. And this is what's so hard for me, is that our kids are learning our history from history books that are 20, 30, 40, even 50 years out of date. Mm-hmm. And you can't do anything about it. It's just a system.
Yeah, Cliff, we've had guests on who are using like ground penetrating radar, the cutting edge gadgets. The mainstream people, the academics, they have fundings. The alternative historians may not have access to that kind of funding or some kind of support, or there's always the rivalry. The alternatives say the mainstream's hiding information. The mainstream says the alternatives are conspiracy theorists and flakes. I'm kind of just with writing for Ancient American Magazine. I'm kind of walking on both but both camps. I don't know. I find that I could do that. But both sides do have truth. There's also some denial might be a word to apply to both camps too.
Yeah, I totally get that too. There is denial in the face of evidence. Yeah,
it's really hard to just you can only have friends in one camp. You can't do that. You have to deal with people at the museums if you want to do research. I just did that over. I was just out the Ohio History Center just last Friday. Had a nice experience out there with Brad and Bill. But in the works that you've read, maybe by Squire and Davis or Caleb Atwater, have you noticed that some of these early 19th century authors have made statements? You sit there and read it, and it's like, where are these guys getting this assumptions that people are populating America, coming from Asia? I mean, we find out, some of the haplotests that are being done nearly 200 years later are actually accurate.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those old, the old timer, authors, we're onto something that's been just suppressed.
Yeah. I mean, the whole Bering Strait migration from Asia to North America. I mean, why say that it's the only way over here? And they found evidence of, people coming down, but, why not transatlantic? Why not? I mean, I had a guest on the other day, Brad Olson, who wrote a book called Sacred Sites in North America. And in New Mexico, there's evidence of Aztec ruins. They don't look like Aztec buildings because they didn't have they didn't have the stone, but they call it the Aztec complex because there's symbology that's similar. And one of the things that Brad was talking about, and he was on Scott Walter's show, I think about a year ago on the Unearthed America, talking about the migration of the Maya, Aztec, and other Central American people into the northern regions where we live. And why academics don't talk about that is hard to understand because there's actual physical evidence. So when you talk about some of the old timers discussing migrations and people, I have to just bring up all of my early reading of the Maya and some of the early universities who went down to Central America and were actually most of the major sites like Chichen Itza, Uxmal, Coba, Tikal, some of the major Mayan sites were excavated by American universities. And in the 1920s, they didn't have a hell of a lot to figure out. And so they made a lot of visual assumptions. And one of the biggest ones I read about by Thompson, who was a Mayanist, is that it seemed that there was a lot of intercultural breeding, because there a lot of the symbology looked Chinese. A lot of the sculptures looked Chinese. And in Tikal, when they first began to excavate those areas, if you look at the ruins, they look like they've been underwater. You know, they were covered as high as the tallest stairway with dirt, and they even reported scenes with seashells and skeletal remains of fish and things like that. I mean, there's all, and they reported this, and then it's all documented, but you don't hear about those kind of things because it just causes too much havoc within the scientific community, and it's sad that has to be the way it is. And I mean, the Americans, I think, are not the only ones who are bad about that. I think the Germans have the same problem. The French, you know, everybody has to kind of make sure everyone's in line. So, you know, so the writing's all the same, so it all makes sense, you know. But I think there's more and more revolutions coming up, and I mentioned John Burke in the beginning. I know for a fact that he used pretty much magnometers, which is a tool to measure geomagnetic fields. But there's new technology. And one of the things that the Mayan elders told me is that a lot of these buildings are alive. A lot of the pyramid complexes are alive. And that was the interpretation. And I never could figure out what they were talking about. What does that mean? What do you mean it's alive? Well, it's not like it's a living, breathing entity. It's more like they've been imbued with subtle energy, and this energy is coming up through the ground, and the engineers understood how to manipulate this energy and imbue the buildings. And so as you climb on them, you're getting bathed in energy. And see, we don't talk a lot about that. I mean, ancient cultures used meditation, they used yoga, they understood the human dynamic, the human body, the consciousness, the different layers a lot more clearer than we do. We're all kind of relearning that. So when I said in the beginning that the ancients were kind of a subtle energy abiding people, that's more in line with being an earth being, an earth centric individual who understands the ebbs and flows of the earth, not, you know, focused on technology and driving around all the time and taking medicines and all this kind of crazy stuff. I'm kind of going off on a tangent. The point is that as we understand how these energies work through technology, that's going to be the great awakener. Is that we'll be able to measure some of these technologies and see what's going on in these buildings, see what remains in the skeletal remains of certain people that are kind of unusual, and that's going to be the big breakthrough. And we're right there. We're right at the cusp of it. So it's kind of exciting. It's exciting times.
Cliff, you're just bringing up the artwork, the Mayan artwork. What do you think is the accuracy of folklore?
Well, we have to use some of it because the native cultures in our country, as well as the Maya, the Maya had most of their codices destroyed, their special bark books. And by the way, I wrote a book. I wrote a piece. It was an article actually on what happened to the Mayans following the Spanish conquistadors' basically destruction of their culture. And what a number of engineers have told me, one in particular, John Ocon, who studied the Mayan engineering techniques. He says, and I believe him, he says the codices were taken from a much earlier culture. They were references copied from manuals, technical manuals. They were reference guides to how to do things, machines and things like that. And when Friar de Landa came and burned mountains of idols and books, he basically destroyed the entire culture of the Maya and probably their ancestors. And what we know today about the Maya is they were they were the descendants of a very, very sophisticated people, very, very sophisticated. Because you don't just start building pyramids out of the blue. There's no references for earlier pyramids. They just started coming up. And engineering a pyramid, I don't know if either one of you guys have been to the Yucatan Peninsula. Have you been to Chichen Itza or Uxmal?
No.
Okay. Uxmal is on the Gulf of Mexico side. And Uxmal has one of the only oval pyramids in the world that goes up about 180 to 200 feet. And to build stone upon stone in a shape of a pyramid in an oval base is a work of masterful engineering. Most of the Mayan complexes are masterful engineered bits of work. And that just showed up. They don't have any kind of a history of building complexes. They just started building them. So they inherited that. And it's a good chance that these codexes had that kind of knowledge. They had knowledge of medicine. They had knowledge of science and engineering, and they were just burned up. So that is a culture that is extremely sophisticated that we do not give enough credence to, because it just would throw our understanding of history into some kind of a deep water. Because why? Here's if people were to recognize the Maya as a really truly brilliant people and not loincloth wearing savages, I think and it really took a look closer at the what's left of their culture, I think you'd see that our ancient history has to be rewritten.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that.
We both think that highly, don't we, Mark?
Yeah, and it's especially with all the information coming out about giants. Yeah, that's been known for a while. Then it just goes dormant, and it's been revived. What do you think about?
It's funny. This has been the year for me to discuss. Well, excuse me. Let's see. I'm trying to think of the first guy. Dewhurst was the first author who I interviewed, who wrote a book, which really, I love you, Robert, but the book was just a compilation of articles. It wasn't until Hugh Newman, Jim Vieira came out with their newest book, Giants on Record, that they began to expand on just simple articles and really they really went into the libraries and went into the Hall of Records in different states and discovered not that they just found bones of these gigantic humans, but other artifacts. And in some cases, there's illustrations of huge stone hammers and things like that. But giants are a challenge for a lot of people because it's a subgroup of humans. Obviously, if you got somebody, and I post a lot of footprints and evidence of giants from different people from around the world. If you look at somebody who's 20 plus feet high, that's a human being that weighs 800 plus pounds. And that's a lot of body. That's a lot of person. So I don't know if I hear, I read about the Native Americans. I read a lot about it. I mean, I definitely believe they were here at some point. But I think, previous civilizations had different environments to live in, and I think they were able to grow because there was a different type of environment in terms of air and gravity and things like that. And so, but you know what? There's so much. I mean, you can get into the mythology about it, the Nephilim in the Bible, these giants from the gods. I mean, who knows? The sky's the limit. So if you ask me what my opinion is, I see the evidence in the documents. I don't know. I mean, I could spin off all over the place on that one. I do know. I just interviewed Jesus Gamarra, who's the most one of the authorities on the stoneworks in Cusco, Peru, and Sacsayhuaman. And if you've ever seen those pictures of that massive, massive megalithic wall, it must have been giants that put those together, because each of those stones weighs 5 to 10 tons, and some of the base stones are 20 to 40 tons each. They're huge. I mean, normal, a couple of people couldn't move those. You had to be pretty strong. So I don't know. I'm open. I'm open to the possibilities.
Do you think that there is some kind of ancient way of levitating these kind of stones that we have lost?
I think it goes back to previous civilizations having different technology. I think levitation is a possibility, but again, using the subtle energies. This is something that we all understand because we understand gravity, we understand electricity. We plug into the wall and we get electricity. It's artificially generated, but electromagnetic fields are similar. And so in our DNA, we kind of know that if we go outside and if we sit on, say, we go to the Snake Mound in Mississippi, and we sit on close to that snake mound that's man-made, it was designed to generate energy. If you sit on there and you close your eyes, you'll get a good charge. But not only that, some people go into altered states of consciousness. You go into a deep meditation if you have any kind of a meditational practice. So I just think that the previous generations understood these subtle energies. And yes, Mark, I really do think that they were probably able to create different fields and remove gravity around a heavy rock and move it into place. I think that's a good possibility. We just don't know because there's no tools left. I mean, some of the illustrations you see. I mean, I remember when I was younger, I saw an illustration of Stonehenge, and there's these robed individuals, and there was like emanations coming out of their foreheads, and the stones were being lifted and put into place. I tend to doubt that more than some kind of a tool that was used to magnify a local geomagnetic field. And then apply it to a stone and then raise it. That seems to be more likely. I mean, what's the guy in Florida that did the huge?
Coral Castle.
Pardon me.
The Coral Castle.
Yeah, Coral Castle. He left some of his tools around, and it appears that he understood. He fell upon artificially generated magnetic fields of some kind where he was able to move these rocks. But again, because we don't have anything to measure these tools with, any kind of scanning technology, any kind of no one's done it yet. We don't know exactly how he was able to move those monstrous stones into place. But obviously, it's always been said that he was by himself. And he did them by himself, so he had some help somewhere. So,
and he bragged he discovered the way the Egyptians moved the rocks, is what he was telling people.
Right? Yeah, which is very, very interesting. I mean, that brings up a whole other possible scenario. But I mean, that place, I haven't been there, but that really looks like a neat place. Would like to go, actually.
You've been to some of the places you feature on your show, like your you've been throughout Central America. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you done any European or Asian investigations?
I've been through. It's funny because I mentioned at the beginning of the show that in 1995, Graham Hancock came out with his book. Well, in 1995, I started really looking into the Maya and found them fascinating, and was befriended by a Mayan elder, a guy named Humboldt's Men, who's they're called day keepers, and they're shaman, they're priests, and he told me about his where he lived. He lived in Merida, and I was like, oh, this is cool. It sounds kind of neat. And he talked about the pyramids, and I thought it was a great story. And then in 1995, when this book came out, it kind of was interesting to me. I went down to Cancun for a short week vacation with her, and I didn't know why, but I decided to take a trip over to Chichen Itza, and I met my friend Humboldt's there. And when I walked through the gates, I was forever changed because you have no idea of the engineering skill of these people until you go and see their cities. And Chichen Itza is one of the best kept and best preserved of all the ruins. There, and most of the listeners have probably heard of El Castillo, the castle, which is their main pyramid. It's really nice. It's beautifully constructed, and at that time you could climb to the top. Now you can't get it. You can't climb anything. They don't let you climb anything, but climb to the top, and everything there is magical. But I mean, it changed me forever. But then I started going every year. I'd go every year for a couple of weeks and do some digs and go with my friend. And then I went to Mexico City. Haven't been to Chiapas yet. I want to go there. You mentioned Europe. I've gone to Europe. I've been in Germany and to London. Haven't seen Stonehenge, but I've seen some smaller places. I think I went to London more for the cathedrals and things like that. But I'm very, very, very focused. For me personally, if I had nothing else to do, I'd probably be going to Central America, because I think that's where the newer discoveries are going to be unveiled. And I think that there's a bigger connection to ancient cultures there than actually in Europe. And I say that because this last asteroid strike, the Younger Dryas asteroid hit, the people that are in the Yucatan Peninsula, they got hit pretty good too. But I think, based on the ruins, that there was more of a diverse cultural exchange. The various cultures kind of came together there because it was probably 15 plus thousand years ago, a really kind of a community, kind of like the United States is a mixing bowl. I think that's what it was going on down there. And you can see evidence of unique sculptures that are kind of Greek-like. You can see Indian-like sculptures. You can see Chinese-like sculptures. And the ruins are very, very diverse, which is kind of fun, you know.
Yeah, Cliff. What you were just saying about Central America offers a lot of new opportunities. I believe when Dennis Stone was on your show, he was talking about some of the chickens in Peru have the same DNA, genetic material as chickens found in Asia, and it shows evidence that they're getting across the Pacific somehow.
Yeah, could be trade routes.
Yeah, and there's just a sample of how some of this new scientific discoveries that are part of haplogroups and genetic testing. It's available for us to prove these theories like the chickens.
Yeah. Yeah, and as more science becomes available to these discoveries, then we can validate those kinds of things. I When I first started doing research years ago, I was always frustrated about why more science hadn't been devoted to certain types of ruins, certain types of people. And the truth is, after talking and becoming friends with a number of archaeologists and anthropologists, is they just don't have the money. There's just no money to research a lot of these projects, and they're limited in what they can study. And I mean, a lot of times, a an amateur scientist or an amateur person will find a discovery, and they can't. The universities can't do anything about it because they can't go out and fund an exploration or an excavation. So
Yeah, they might. Yeah, like these colleges might only be at a dig for a couple weeks,
yeah,
and what with some of this lack of funding, we can bomb a third world country for
we can create more fossils, huh?
Yeah, but we can't do anything that's going to help our understanding of our history. But that's another story.
no,
But
that's a big problem too. I mean, there's so much money in military spending. If and of course, I don't know if you know anybody who's a teacher. They don't pay teachers anything. It's really sad. My girlfriend is a school counselor, and it's just ridiculous what they pay these people. So, academics typically aren't very well paid either. So it's all love of the job, and it's not well funded. So a lot of these potential discoveries are going to have to sit idle until somebody finds them worthy enough to be uncovered.
Well, from my understanding, there's quite a few pyramids in Egypt that they know of, but they don't have the funding to uncover. And the same thing with down in Yucatan and stuff.
That's true.
Peru.
Oh my God! It's funny because every time I think of this one area, it's called Sail, which is on the Gulf side of Yucatan. It's this beautiful, beautiful complex, and it's very, very obvious that at one time it was deeply underwater because of the runoff of the ruins, the way the ruins were destroyed and how the water undulated and pretty much collapsed. But the thing that's really, really cool is that a lot of the complex is deep. It's under dirt. It's like it's been covered by sediment and dirt. And so some of the doorways, and it's so obvious to me, and I've taken pictures of this, some of the doorways, the only thing you see is the very tip of the doorway, the door jamb, because the entrance to the building has been covered up, to almost to the top of the roof. And there's huge sections of this, and it's like it's so obvious that it was covered with mud, and there was some kind of a tsunami or something that just brought the place underwater, and then the sediment settled and covered it up. And I'd love for somebody to get in there and dig, but most universities are limited to a couple of places, and then it's left up to the Mexican government, and that's a third world country, so they just don't have the funding. It's tough.
Sounds like archaeology needs a sugar daddy.
Yeah.
We need a billionaire to, like Bill Gates, to decide we need to learn more about our history.
It's funny though, because I'm here in the Bay Area and there's billions of dollars in tech funding, and I'm like, how can we tap some of these guys to get some good archaeological digs going? But you had to figure out a way to motivate them. You had to do some real serious crowdfunding. You have to have a good theme going.
Cliff, we've done, Thomas and I have done some shows on historic preservation. Helping to raise funds to at least buy the property, to preserve it. I don't know if digging is going to be done, but at least it's not going to be bulldozed and have a neighborhood built on top of it. One of my interests would be to research more about the giants. So we have, Thomas and I have covered, several different angles of preservation and raising money. If you had the money, what would be one of the topics you would like to explore and know more about?
I talked a little bit about it in the beginning, the work of John Burke. John began testing his theory of these electromagnetic or geomagnetic fields or telluric fields that naturally emanate. And he was able to use a magnometer, which is a tool that measures the magnetic fields that come out of the Earth. I know, and I've been sent information on new types of technology that are able to scan an unseen field. And I think that in our lifetime we'll be able to, I'd like to speed this up though, but I think they'll be able to create a scanning technology that actually shows that the ancient pre-dynastic Egyptians imbued buildings, imbued artifacts with information. So as an example, if you pick up, say, a scarab, that scarab has been imbued with some information that is transferred to that person through a meditative process. And to have a scanning technology that actually shows that this device has been imbued with energy, or a ruin, a pyramid is emanating pulsating energy, that would be something I'd love to have financed, because I think we're right on the edge of that, but it's not quick enough for me.
Would you like to do that in Central America? Or are you talking about Egypt?
Everywhere. I mean, okay. Burke was all over the United States. I mean, he was in mounds. He was in these. If you go see his book, he actually photographed orbs that were bubbling up out of Serpent Mound, a number of really well-known mounds throughout the eastern side of the United States. But of course, my passion, I love my country, but I love Central America. Central America is a major discovery waiting to happen. I really believe so.
Okay. I can't remember the name of the place down there, but there's one place down there in Peru, I believe, that in the one valley, they believe there's up to 25 pyramids. I can't think of the name of it at the moment. And these are mud brick pyramids, and they predate any of the other ones.
There's a lot of really ancient Peru and South America has a lot of really ancient places.
We really don't have a way of dating them other than finding pottery and stuff around them.
I mean, that's another invention. If someone could figure out a way to date stone, that would be a huge thing, because we're only using, for the most part, carbon dating, carbon-14. And I think that's really a lot of guesswork, because they're basing the discoveries on what the carbon was like when they were built and things like that. And who knows? I mean, it's hard to say that is the best way to do it. And the other problem with carbon dating is they have to use organic material. You can't use inorganic material. So,
right. Hey, Cliff, we have about a minute left. Do you want to shout out your contact information, where to listen to Earth Ancients?
Sure. Yeah. Earth Ancients is on Blog Talk Radio. You can just Google Earth Ancients and you'll get radio. We have a very active Facebook page. We have an international group of authors and researchers who are constantly posting information. But, check it out. Saturday at 10 a.m. on the West Coast. But if you go to Blog Talk, go to Earth Ancients, or just look it up, Earth Ancients Radio. You can hear it anytime. It's a podcast, so it's downloadable and it's free.
Do you have a Facebook page?
That's it. Earth Ancients Facebook.
Okay. Thank you for joining us this evening. We enjoyed
All right, guys. Thank you. Good luck. Appreciate it, your help.
We'll be right back, folks.